LLP. Now, I would request Mr. Alok Chattopadhyay to deliver the welcome address to our panelists and our delegates on behalf of Indian Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all here today. On behalf of the Indian Chamber of Commerce, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone present here with us. First of all, on behalf of the Indian Chamber of Commerce, I would like to express my great pleasure in welcoming Sri Supratim Bandyopadhyay, Chairman, PFRDA. It also gives me a great delight to welcome Mr. Suranjan Banerjee, Associate Director, Retirement, Willis Towers Watson, for being with us today. I also welcome Mrs. Bharoj Khamdin, Partner, Deloitte Haskins & Sells LLP, for joining us today. I warmly welcome Sri Mano Phukon, General Manager, PFRDA, for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, retirement is the eventuality of the decades of hard work put in one's career. This should be the golden period of life, free from financial worries. Retirement planning is about ensuring financial independence for an individual after he concludes his active work life, particularly in our kind of countries where the social security cover is rather thin. However, retirement planning remains one of the low-rated priorities among the working population because most people feel that retirement is far away and nearer-term priorities seem important. For many, there are financial obligations like home loan EMIs, children's education, saving for children's marriage, etc. And accumulating a large sum for carefree retirement seems a daunting task for them. While the task is daunting, it is quite achievable if one has a good financial plan in place and starts saving for retirement early in one's career. India does not have a universal pension program for its 1.3 billion people. The increase in life expectancy, aging populations, and decline in the traditional supportive family structure are now placing a growing financial strain on the social security and safety nets, making it difficult for governments to support their senior citizens. The three most crucial elements of the pension fund industry in India are Employees Provident Fund, popularly known as EPF, Public Provident Fund, PPF, and National Pension Scheme, NPS, catering to the needs of the different segments of population. The retirement fund corpus was worth about 2.3 lakh crore in 2018 and is expected to reach 6.2 lakh crore by 2025, expanding at a compounded annual growth rate of nearly 14.33% during the 2020 to 25 period. A sound, efficient, and reliable pension system in the economy has gained urgency in view of COVID-19 pandemic. The uncertainties emerging out of the COVID-19 pandemic saw a 30% increase in individual subscription, the National Pension System NPS, in first quarter of financial year 2021 compared to same period last year. Thus, the pandemic has brought in the realization that retirement planning is not a mere saving or tax benefit choice, but about securing one's financial future. The ICC, even in these trying times, through its webinars, has been actively involved in knowledge sharing regarding different sectors of economy as well as different aspects of business. Today, this webinar is organized as an attempt to disseminate knowledge about the benefits of pension planning and encouraging adoption of pension products. With these few words, I once again welcome all our eminent guests and speakers and look forward to fruitful deliberations and interactions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can we now invite Chairman sir to give the keynote address, please?
Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, which is organized by ICC, I believe Hyderabad chapter, on retirement benefits and the progress of the same during the pandemic period. So I first of all thank Mr. Chattopadhyay, Mr. Ghosh and their entire team for taking this initiative. I believe in the current year, this is the third or fourth such webinar we are having and in different centers. And through that, I believe effort is being made to create awareness about retirement saving, whether it is through NPS or some other thing. Apart from that, I welcome my co-panelists. Mr. Suranjan Banerjee will be talking about the retirement scenario in India vis-a-vis the global scenario today. And Madam Behrouz Kamdin will be talking about the tax implication. And my colleague, Mr. Fukan, will be talking about the NPS, the product as such. As Mr. Chattopadhyay has rightly pointed out, that anything that has to do with retirement saving, that is a plan normally we defer to the maybe the last phase of our working life, and the planning starts maybe late 40s or early 50s, and by that time it is too late. When we talk about pension, 3-4 things that come to our mind and which is present before all of us, whether we recognize it or not, that is another issue, is that the increasing population. If you look at the country itself, India, we believe as per the statistics available by 2027, another 7 years down the line, and I believe all of us will be a witness to that, that India will be the most populous country in the world, even surpassing China. That is a fact. Fact number 2 is that the population of India is also aging. All these days, we have been talking about the demographic dividend, that a large part of our population, they are in the working age group and they are driving the economy. So that's a very strong point of India. But slowly the wheels are also turning, and we'll see by 2050 that almost out of every 5 person alive, one will be a senior citizen. So normally they will not be working. Fact number 3 is that the life expectancy is increasing. It is increasing across all the countries in the world, and India also, it has increased tremendously. Today, life expectancy at birth is around 68 years. So a person who is born today is expected to live for another 68 years. And life expectancy at the age of 60 years is about another 18 to 20 years. So that's a long time. So that's why the planning is required. And the fourth, another fact that we have to take into account, what happens when a person goes into retirement, post-retirement, what happens? The family support system that has eroded completely. So the expectation of a support from a joint family system or other family members is almost gone. So that person is almost on his or her own. And that's why the retirement planning is a must today. Already Mr. Chattopadhyay told about EPFO and other pension schemes. And if you add up all together, because here in India, the pension scheme is also very, very fragmented. We have seen EPFO. Along with that, there is a EPS scheme, which is the employees pension scheme. Apart from that, there is certain pension schemes, group superannuation schemes, which are managed by insurance companies, NPS and Atal Pension Yojana managed by PFRDA-ICC. Then there are other sector-specific provident funds, all taken together, if you look at it, our pension asset to GDP is hardly about 10%. There are developed countries where the pension asset to GDP ratio is more than 100%. Three such examples are Switzerland, where it is 148% of the GDP, Australia about 120%, and UK about 105% of GDP. Even in United States, it is as high as 83% of the GDP. And there we are at just 10%. We have a lot of catching up to do there, because unless the pension assets increase and people, as Mr. Chattopadhyay rightly said, retire with a substantial corpus, then obviously living for next 18, 20 or whatever years becomes very, very painful and very, very difficult. Actually, NPS started with central government employees way back in 2004. And this is the first defined contribution scheme which was created by Government of India in lieu of the old pension scheme. As you know, earlier there was a old unfunded pension scheme where it was a pay-as-you-go kind of a system, where as people retire, normally they will be getting 50% of that last drawn pay as pension, and it will continue forever with DA increase every 3 months or 6 months. And as and when the salary, also there is a wage revision, the revision will be affected in the pension also. But in 2004, it was decided the burden to the exchequer is too much. So it is better to have a defined contribution scheme. NPS was brought in. Then it went to state government employees, and slowly it was opened up to all retail customers, corporates, everybody. It has grown, and it has grown tremendously, with asset base growing at almost a compounded rate of more than 30-35%. Current year also, as we talk today, we find the asset base has grown to almost by 30% over last March. And growth continues steadily. We have about 38.7 million total customers under NPS today. Yes, we know, looking at the total requirement of India, and if you look at even the total unorganized sector also, it is only a part of that, small part of that. We have a long, long way to go. But I believe the journey has begun in the right earnest. When we are talking about corporates, we have more than 8,200 corporates almost registered with us. Some of these corporates registered because they have mandatorily brought a pension scheme for their employees. Like PSU banks. PSU banks, what they did, all the employees recruited after 2010, I think the cutoff date was 1st April 2010, these employees were necessarily asked to join this defined contribution scheme, and they came to NPS. And then there is a group of central public sector enterprises. They also had their own superannuation scheme, and when they found NPS to be a better option, they shifted en bloc to NPS. And there are 45 big CPSEs which have already shifted to us, and there are many CPSEs which are in the process of shifting. But apart from that, there are many corporates who joined voluntarily, and there is no compulsion on the employees to join the NPS. But as we go along, we believe that these corporates also have a role to play in engaging with their employees and giving them an advice also to create or set aside a corpus for their retirement. Because the NPS is a very, very flexible kind of scheme. It does not demand a certain kind of contribution at any point of time, whether the subscriber is ready, whether the subscriber has enough liquidity with him or her. It can start with a small amount, and as the person grows in his working life, his salary, his income goes up, and his liquidity levels also go up, he can contribute according to his wish. Yes, there are certain exclusive tax benefits. I believe tax benefits will be taken in detail by Madam Barrows, but I only want to say that there is a 50,000 exclusive tax benefit if you invest in NPS, uh, which is not there in any other scheme. So few people take it as basically a tax incentive kind of a scheme where if they invest, a part of their income gets tax benefit. But our suggestion would be that don't look at it as a scheme which is giving you some tax incentive or a scheme which is giving you a good return. Beyond that, you take it as a sort of a return benefit product, a product which will generate a very good amount of corpus at the point of your retirement, and it will give a support throughout thereafter. As I was talking about corporates, apart from the mandatory corporates, in other corporates we see, since it is voluntary and it cannot be imposed on the subscribers or the employees, the ratio at which these employees are joining is pretty low. Somewhere it is just 1.5% or 2% of the employees, they have only joined the scheme. So there, I believe the corporates themselves, they have a huge role to play, and they can guide their employees properly and say that yes, scheme is required and a retirement benefit scheme is required, and they should join this scheme and join at an early age, so that over a period of 30-35 years they can really build up a very huge corpus which will help them in meeting their needs post-retirement. To engage with the NPS subscribers, what we have done, and especially during the pandemic period, we have taken a lot of new onboarding methods where, without giving a physical form or being present physically, giving their KYCs physically, they can do onboarding fully on online method. They need not be exposed to banks or our distribution channels. They can do it sitting at their home. And as a result of that, as Mr. Chattopadhyay rightly pointed out, we have seen a growth throughout this period. When other products were facing challenges, their number of subscribers growth was coming down. Not for a single month, not for a single fortnight, we have seen a downfall. We have seen a steady growth, and the contributions are also coming steadily from all the sectors, whether it is central government, state government, corporates, individuals. So everybody is coming and contributing as and when needed. As I said, it has a flexibility of not contributing a certain amount every year. That gives, I believe, a lot of benefit to NPS over other these kind of products. Apart from that, we have given a flexibility that if you wish, you can change your fund manager. Your scheme remains same, you change your fund manager. You are not happy with the performance of your current fund manager. We have 7 fund managers. You can change over to another fund manager. If you think that equity is too volatile, I cannot take too much of risk on equity, you can reduce your equity allocation. You can go over to government securities where you feel that there is more safety. You can do that. So staying in the same scheme without closing the scheme, you can do all these things. You can change your asset allocation twice a year. You can change your fund manager once a year. Apart from that, if you look at from the cost angle also, possibly this is the lowest cost pension product available all over the world. Nowhere in the world they give this kind of a pension product with this kind of a cost structure. We have seen that for over a period of 30 or 35, 40 years, hardly the total charge ratio is little over 1%, where the next contender or the next country, which is the next lowest, is about a little over 6%. So there is absolutely no comparison. Our fund managers charge fund management charge of 1 basis point. For every 100 rupee you give, they will charge only 1 paise to manage your fund. And sometimes people may feel that since the fund management charge is low, maybe the fund performances are not that good. That is also not true. Here, over the years, our debt funds have given over a period of 11 to 12 years any return between 10 to 10.5%. Equity fund, despite this volatility, is giving a return of more than 9% over a period of 10, 11 years. And so it's a long-term track record that we are talking about. Yes, definitely it is a market-linked scheme. Whatever happened 10 years down the line, whether it will be repeated for next 10 years, nobody can predict that. But long-term track record says the funds are performing quite well. The asset management systems are very robust. The quality of assets remain very strong. And the number of subscribers are increasing. So here, again, while thanking ICC for taking it to the corporates at around Hyderabad, the same time we encourage and the corporates to see that more and more of their staff members, if you are already registered, they can join. And if you have any question, any query, any issues regarding taking your subscribers in the NPS system, you can always feel free to talk to us. You can engage with us at any point of time. We'll be too happy to help you out. So thank you all. And I believe after all the presentations are over, if there are questions, we'll be too happy to answer them. So thank you, ICC, and thank you all the co-panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. Now I would like to invite the next speaker, Mr. Suranjan Banerjee, Associate Director, Retirement, Wills Towers Watson.
Yes, hi. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'll just put the slides up before I start. Just give me 1 second. Okay, great. Can I just check, Mr. Ghosh, are my slides up on screen?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, great. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ghosh, Mr. Chattopadhyay for the introductions, and of course, a very good afternoon to everyone on the webcast today. Before I start, just to say that it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be speaking at these events and to share the virtual panel with such distinguished guests. I would like to thank especially the Indian Chamber of Commerce as well as the PFRDA for continuing to give us these opportunities. Okay, right. So today I'll be speaking to you about retirement benefits planning, and my approach to this would be to present to you some results from 2 surveys that Willis Towers Watson has carried out over the last 12 months. And whilst the surveys don't specifically focus on COVID-19, we should remember that quite a few of the sort of interim relief measures have been taken up, and therefore individuals, as we come out of this pandemic, should start thinking not just about the pandemic itself, but also to, like Mr. Chairman said, to consider what is the right level of savings for a sustainable retirement, and if anything, even with more rigor than before, because the pandemic has shown us how volatile things can be, and every day is not going to be a good day in terms of how the markets perform, etc. So just to introduce the surveys themselves, the first survey pertains to how corporate sector employees, and I believe that's a lot of you are going to be representing that sector today, how the employees are feeling about retirement benefit savings in general. The survey itself was carried out in 2019. where we interviewed several thousand individuals across several countries about a wide variety of topics related to their current financial situation. And this is actually included a substantial section, as you can imagine, on retirement benefits, right? So I will share some key highlights from you from there, which are relevant to India. Again, I will not take you through the entire survey, but just some points which I feel you will find of value and of interest. The second survey, which is sort of just come out, and this is from the other side, right, which is basically looking at how employers, or more specifically about 160 private sector companies across different industries such as pharma, FMCG, manufacturing, telecom, etc. In terms of how they're feeling about what benefits, in particular the retirement benefits they're offering to their employees, and how they feel that those benefits are being received. And overall, I believe that these two surveys, when considered in aggregate, present sort of two sides of the same coin, where we can see how employees perceive the benefits being provided, as well as employers being able to ensure that they are able to address the key needs of their employees. Okay, so let's get stuck in. So, before I get into the Indian context, I thought it would be good to bring out some key themes which have emerged on a global level from this survey. So first and foremost, no surprises that we find that there's been a definite erosion, of the retirement provision. And the easiest example, just like Mr. Chairman also just pointed out, is a very clear switch from a service-based final salary type benefit plan to a simple defined contribution plan. Now, why is this a weakening? Because, like Sir said, earlier there used to be this promise that whatever happens at the end of my service, I will get access to 50% or half of my last drawn pay as a regular pension for as long as I'm alive or my spouse is alive. And then there's also the promise that it will keep increasing, with DNS allowance. So not only is my income looked after, my income in real terms is also looked after, which means that, that it will go up with, for example, covering medical costs, covering food inflation, etc. Now, with this weakening of this provision, large-scale prevalence of defined and the large-scale prevalence of defined contribution plans, in which inherently the risks are being sort of not just shared but effectively transferred to individuals, I think there is a need for them to understand what these risks are and how they might affect the outcomes. So whilst regulators are doing their bit, for example, by having some default investment strategies which help employees reduce risk over time. A good example is the life cycle fund that we already have under NPS, or the various types of life cycle funds that we already have under NPS. We do feel that employers also need to play a much wider role in the education of their employees when it comes to taking smart decisions for their retirement benefits and corpus. And finally, when individuals approaching retirement ages are servicing larger levels of debt with smaller proportion of housing wealth. Now, what this effectively means is their financial commitments may not permit them to, let's say, retire in the traditional sense of the word, and they are having to continue to find opportunities to work either within their current employers or elsewhere. So these are some of the global themes, and I think slowly, as India also matures, I think, like Sir said, very shortly we're going to have a significant percentage of our workforce or of our population, beyond that 60-year age bracket. You'll find a lot of these trends which typically are already being found in sort of the some of the more advanced economies will slowly start to come to India as well. Okay, and based on respondents just from India, what did we find? So we found that about 30% of them felt that they were not heading in the right direction in relation to their financial position. This would include various aspects such as access to emergency funds, long-term savings to meet life goals, retirement savings, debt management, etc. Now, remember, this survey was actually done before COVID, and I feel that if this was done, if we did this survey now, we'll feel that some of these numbers will actually become a little bit higher when people have actually had to access some of those emergency funds, etc. 30% also feel that they're not heading in the right direction, specifically in relation to their retirement savings. Nearly 60% feel that they're not saving enough for retirement, which links with our broader finding that individuals themselves are struggling to be able to retire at ages in previous generations. And like I said, people are looking at working beyond, let's say, traditionally the 60 years or the 62, and then eventually potentially even working beyond 65, which is a very common phenomena now in the UK, for example. The good news in all of this is that more than half of these individuals have actually increased their allocation to retirement savings in the last 2 years. Now, it's a different issue as to what may be considered enough or appropriate, and I will try and look at that in one of my subsequent slides. But an increase in the savings or the allocation towards retirement savings, we can argue, is definitely a step in the right direction. Okay. So just continuing on from the previous slide, I think if we were to divide all the respondents into 3 non-overlapping buckets, what we'd find that is that roughly 30% felt that they are falling behind on their retirement savings, and also felt that they had not taken any steps to address the situation. For example, due to other more pressing financial commitments, such as debt repayments or children's education, or some of the other priorities that they may have at this time. More than 40% actually felt that they were on the right track, meaning that they were doing enough to work towards a comfortable retirement, at least in their own opinion. And these individuals could be benefiting from, let's say, a lack of debt and presence of fixed assets such as housing, or, for example, living with parents or in ancestral property. And finally, the balance 30% felt that whilst they weren't on track as yet, they had recognized that there was a problem, and they were in the process of taking proactive steps towards increasing their retirement savings. And possible ways in which they might be doing so is sort of, I think, Sir mentioned earlier, investments in corporate NPS plans, but that's not the only option. Enhancing their allocation to voluntary provident fund, or even creating other savings earmarked for retirement. For example, they may even have a deferred pension plan with, let's say, one of the large insurance companies, such as LIC. Okay, so like I said earlier, I think, I will try and sort of quantify some of these, retirement-based, savings-based retirement outcomes. And on this slide, I will try and share some numbers with you. There is an old concept called the net replacement ratio, and I will use that in order to sort of explain what I've done here. Very simply put, this figure defines how much you are likely to have as regular income just after retirement, and that when we express that as a percentage of what you were receiving just before you retired from your income through salary. Now, just a very simple example, I think, the public sector or the old public sector employees, so if they retired at a salary of, let's say, hypothetically 1 lakh rupees, they would be entitled to receive a regular pension of half of that, which is about 50,000. So that suggests the replacement ratio is about 50%. And going by some examples we've seen from other countries, a typical net replacement ratio about 50 to 70% can be considered as a reasonable outcome. I mean, for the simple reasons that once you retire, some of your expenses come down. For example, commuting or having to purchase some goods which you no longer purchase once you didn't have to go to work. And this should also be adjusted for taxes. But just to keep my calculation simple, I've actually ignored that for the moment. Right, so the examples more specifically looks at someone who basically starts working at 23 years of age with a basic salary of about 25,000 a month. The other assumptions, as you can see, are at the bottom of the screen. I will not take you through each of these assumptions, but I have sort of taken cognizance of the fact that, what have the returns been in the past? But as we come into a sort of a low interest regime, what are these returns likely to be over the long term, not just over the next year or two? So what did we find, right? So we found that if the individual only had statutory benefits, such as which are in India just limited to sort of PF in the corporate sector, specifically limited to the Employees Provident Fund, as well as the gratuity payable under the Payment of Gratuity Act, and they used all of the proceeds that they received as lump sum, and if they used all of that lump sum to buy an annuity income at today's rates, let's just say, then they'll be able to achieve a net replacement ratio of about 34%, which is just above, let's say, 1/3 of their last drawn salary. I know superannuation is not very popular these days, and it's probably sort of going away. But let's say hypothetically that the same individual also had access to a superannuation fund, then this would actually increase this replacement ratio, or the ability to purchase an annuity would actually increase or enhance to about 46% of their last drawn pay. And then finally, if we add NPS, not just the 50,000 that everybody has access to, but also the extra 10% of basic salary, then that actually increases substantially to about 63%, which then gets into a territory where we can say that, look, this is turning out to be a reasonable outcome for these individuals. Having said that, we also need to consider the following points. This particular example assumes that the person starts fairly early. So for example, starting as early as 23, and even for voluntary plans, as we do know that a lot of individuals, and this is where I think the employer role comes in, that a lot of individuals prefer cash early in their careers. And the longer we delay the investments, the power of compounding and all of that, which I'm sure you folks are already familiar with, the more difficult it becomes to catch up, right? So, just delaying the decision to start savings, particularly for retirement, makes the risk even bigger that you will not have enough funds when you need them. Further, the assumption here that basic salary is actually 50% of gross pay, which effectively means that an individual is saving around 25% of their total salary to achieve a replacement ratio of 63% in the end. Unfortunately, in reality, the market median is actually much lower than 50%, about 30 to 40% of gross salary, which is actually classified as basic. So a lot of our retiral contributions, which are linked to basic, are actually at only a fraction of our total compensation. However, that might be subject to change under the new code on wages and the Social Security code, which we'll probably park for now. And finally, my last point being that the outcome here is by no means guaranteed, and I do want to remind that the investment risk, or the risk of the annuity terms changing, or any other shocks to the economic environment are still very much with the individual, right? So this is just a deterministic projection based on certain assumptions, but there are other things that the individuals will need to think about. For example, the risk of poor investment returns, for example, even inflation, right? So these illustrations are based on the purchase of a fixed income annuity. So, but we must remind ourselves that actually inflation is not really being covered here. So even if you start your retired life with about 60% of your last drawn salary, that will slowly erode the more you go into into your post-retirement years, and therefore that is something that should be considered. But I do hope that this gives a small peek into the financial requirements to be able to achieve the retirement outcomes that can be deemed to be reasonable. And also clearly highlighting that just having the mandatory plans may not be enough. In fact, this also makes the assumption that somebody will convert the lump sum income into a pension, but I do know that a lot of us actually don't, or the propensity to kind of use that lump sum and allocate it to areas apart from retirement are actually quite high. Okay, so coming back to the other survey now. So what I'll do is now just flip sides a bit and look at this from the lens of the employers, and consider what have they been thinking about the retirement benefit offerings that they have at their companies. Now this result is actually a short pulse survey, and this was actually conducted in July and August of this year. So this is kind of well into the pandemic territory. Nevertheless, I think some of the themes that we found were agnostic to whether the pandemic was there or not. Okay, so the first slide actually talks about the corporate NPS, which companies have been adopting and offering to their employees on a voluntary basis. And we find that the number of companies which have actually taken up NPS, and again, this is a small sample size in relation to the entire universe. So the record keeping agencies might have other figures, but just based on what we found is that the number had gone up from about 43% when we did the survey last year to 51%. So we have reached kind of the halfway mark. And also what is good and what is promising is that another 20% of our respondents actually said we're either in the process of implementing it, or we are considering its implementation, sort of within the next year or two. And I'll just pause here from the survey, and having personally assisted a lot of our clients in implementing NPS despite the so-called lockdown, I think the PFRDA, the CRAs, and all the POPs I think deserve a special mention, because I think all necessary steps have been taken to ensure that the enrollments could take place virtually. And given that a lot of individuals were actually at home, we saw a larger than usual interest levels in awareness sessions, and I believe that has also translated into better take-up rates, something we will continue to monitor. But I just thought that was worth a mention that, despite the pandemic, NPS enrollments, and like Mr. Chairman suggested, even the voluntary contributions, they've all actually kept on going in the background. So just wanted to recognize, the entities who've been behind that. Okay, and then till the time the survey was conducted, sort of the average corporate NPS take-up rate, and when I say take-up rate, it means if you're offering something on a voluntary basis to a population, how much of that population is actually taking it up. So typical average NPS take-up rate is being reported to be around 11%, and of course, as you can see, it sort of varies quite a lot. Right, in terms of 1/3 of the companies actually reporting a rate of less than 5%, and a few companies at the top end reporting a voluntary take-up rate of more than a quarter, right, which is good. These are similar to the rates we saw last year. However, there has been a small shift in terms of more companies are coming out of that less than 5% bracket, which we felt was anyway going to happen, because it's just sort of maybe an awareness issue, or people not necessarily engaging with something that's actually new. But the more they socialize, the more they hear from their colleagues and their friends, they will understand that there are the benefits of NPS, and therefore they are coming forward to enroll as well. Also, just a quick note, that we felt that some of the recent budget announcements also may have gotten some of the employees to rethink their retirement savings plans. For example, the new regime versus the old regime. Now there being an overall limit of overall annual limit of 7.5 lakhs on all employer contributions on retirals. I'll of course let Ms. Behroz Kamdin talk about that in more detail. But we feel that that some of these changes and these moving goalposts may have sort of come in the way of NPS take-up rates increasing even further this year. Also, I think we need to ensure that individuals for whom NPS is a voluntary program, they can actually understand the value proposition and make an informed choice. Which maybe isn't happening at the level that we would ideally want. For example, in some of the large corporates, we find that the employees aren't necessarily, all that information isn't necessarily cascading all the way down to the employees for them to be able to make an informed choice. Obviously with the high earners or people who stand to gain the most in terms of tax, they're opting in. But I think what we really need is to penetrate and go down to some of the younger folk who maybe don't necessarily need the tax saving, but I think just to inculcate a habit of saving and starting early to think about things like retirement, because that will only make their life easier in the long run. Additionally, we find that employers who offer flexibility in relation to choosing a particular contribution level, with roughly half of them letting their employees choose an amount up to the tax ceiling, right? So again, this means that you don't actually have to start at the full maximum. In this case, let's say 10% of basic, but you can actually start lower, and that's the flexibility that NPS provides us. That from the start, maybe you start at 2%, 5%, whatever you're comfortable with. But that again, that habit, of saving, especially for retirement, starts the earlier it starts, the better it is. And the another trend that seems to be emerging is that employers are open to assisting employees with some of the cost, right? So again, this has been a territory which has only started to be explored, because in our experience, employers weren't really saying that, we'll pick up any of the charges. But this year it's been a shift where at least some of the POP related charges, the employers are coming forward and saying, look, let us pick that cost up for you. It's not a big cost, but let's at least get that out of the way, so you don't have any barriers from a cost perspective. Okay, and this slide shows the interest that has been shown by companies to, enable portability from legacy superannuation funds over to the NPS, right? So I think as far back as 2017, I think it's been about 3 years since we had a circular where, permission was given for employees to exercise the right at least once in their career to be able to port the corpus they would have built up in superannuation funds over to their tier 1 NPS account, and this would be free of any sort of tax charge or any of any income tax. So since then we have seen a steady interest in this, because companies are considering, they are thinking that, okay, now with NPS being a centralized or centrally run and governed DC product with a lot of choice, do we still run our SAF, which again, is specific to us, has lower portability, sort of opaque investment returns, etc. So do we now just help our employees then move over to NPS? So just to cover the numbers on the screen, so whilst 8% have already done it or have enabled their employees to exercise the right to move their corpus to NPS, another 34% are either doing it right now or are considering it in the future. So, but we're still left with, sort of 60% of legacy superannuation funds, which are probably sort of waiting and watching, or are making sure that first they focus on their NPS offering, ensure that the take-up rates are in the right place before they offer this additional flexibility to their employees on superannuation plans. Right. So in a couple of final slides from me, and on this I will look at some of the more recent regulatory developments, and here we look at how employers are responding, to the recent overall limit that has now been placed of 7.5 lakh on total employer contribution towards an individual's retirement arrangements. So in aggregate, the employer's contribution to PF, to superannuation funds, and to NPS, and we know that they're all sort of paid at different percentages, right, and have their own. Superannuation fund used to have its own ring-fenced tax allowance as well, but I think that's been done away with as well. So the respondents basically said an overwhelming 84% said that they had till now not taken any steps considering this change at this stage. A small 7% said that they're restructuring the salary, they're restructuring the overall salary breakup, and 5% are actually looking at increasing flexibility on their NPS plan. So basically saying that, look, we may have only enabled you to join at a certain rate, but if that rate is not tax viable, here you go, a bit more flexibility for you to kind of keep your compensation structure tax efficient, even if the overall cap now applies. And finally, couldn't have finished without at least having one slide on this. So at least a quick mention on the recent changes that we are seeing in the code on wages, and of course the more recent code on social security. So now, whilst I don't claim to be an expert in this area, but there appear to be some very obvious impacts that we're going to see on the retirement benefits, in particular the retirement benefits which are offered by corporates to their employees. And these could be the following. So, a lot of companies will need to review their overall compensation structure and reconsider how they determine the wages that are being used for determining some key statutory benefits such as gratuity and PF, right? And sort of prima facie, one way of doing this is to uplift your basic salary to at least 50% of your total wages. And given where the market median is around 35%, this will potentially lead to a much higher number on which those above mentioned amounts will have to be determined. For example, if now the basic component goes up from 35 to 50, remember that's almost a 50% increase, and so corresponding increase on your PF contributions and your gratuity. And that in turn, at least on a gratuity side, will also increase your liability provisions as well as future payouts. Again, I think more clarity is sought in this space in terms of what the government or what the code will include and exclude. I mean, there are some areas which are still under debate, such as sort of variable pay. But as we get more clarity leading up to 1st of April, something that employers should keep in mind. And of course, on the PF side, just to add in terms of the gratuity liability going up, on the PF side, given in India, we have a CTC concept. What may just happen is that even if the overall compensation of someone remains the same, their take-home pay will likely go down because, we're now putting more from their overall compensation, which isn't increasing. We're taking more and putting it into PF, which might be good for long-term savings. But obviously, for some of your employees, they may wish to have more cash in hand. And again, one thing that has come out in our survey, despite these consequences, these potential consequences, it's actually surprising to see that only 13% of companies have actually assessed the impact that this definition change will have on their retirement benefit obligations, or even on their sort of compensation structure. But I suppose this number is already going up since I put the slide together and since the survey was carried out, because leading, like I said, up to 1st April, we're seeing a lot more of these conversations happening actively. Okay, so I think with that, I thank you all for your time. And I will look forward to any of your questions in the Q&A session. At this stage, maybe I'll pass back to Mr. Ghosh to take the session forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I would request Mr. Mono Fukon, General Manager at PFRDA, to deliver his thoughts. Sir, unmute yourself, please.
Other speaker, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I hope you'll be able to hear me. I'm just sharing my slides. Just 1 second. Yeah, just thank you. And I'll just give an insight on the product itself, on the national pension system. Basically, the uniqueness of this pension account is that it is transferable across all employment and location. Because the pension account that we termed as the permanent retirement account number remains unchanged even for an individual, even if it changes employment or locations. So this is the uniqueness of it, that it is portable across employment and geographies. And the next is that it is the lowest cost pension product across the globe. In fact, as Chairman Sir has already told about this, that we are one of the lowest cost pension scheme that has been offered by us. There's flexibility of choices in the selection of a record keeper, fund manager, and asset allocations. There are a lot of flexibility which can be changed over a period of time, and that I'll explain it later part in my slides. The returns on the schemes are very attractive. In fact, in the sense that they have delivered, the fund managers have delivered very competitive returns comparable to other financial products. Tax efficient in the sense that a lot of tax benefits are there on contributions, and also on maturity there are various tax benefits on contributions, accumulations, and also on exit, which Madam Behrouz will be explaining in detail. Transparency in the fact that you can have access, the transactions in the account are very transparent. So whatever the contributions are there, how the way it's being invested, and what value is being shown in the account, that can be accessed online 24/7 through the by a subscriber logging into his account or by accessing through a mobile app. The scheme is regulated by PFRDA. We the fund managers, the record keepers, and all the intermediaries that are involved, distribution points that are being involved, are being registered by the regulator himself. And we float the various rules and guidelines for their operations. Coming next on the NPS, we have two types of account. The tier one, the term that is being used is basically the pension account, where all the tax benefits are available, and there are certain restrictions on withdrawal into it. There is a certain locking period of 10 years, and there are certain conditions for partial withdrawal also. And the minimum contribution for opening the account is 500, and in a year, a person needs to contribute only 1,000 rupees into that account. And on the upper limit, there is no upper limit on the amount of contributions that can be made to the pension account. The other type of account which is not that can be opened only when you have pension account, the Tier 2, which is freely withdrawable. There are no tax benefit into it. And for opening the account, only 1,000 rupees is required. And the minimum contributions is 250 rupees per contribution. The only difference between these two is that it is freely withdrawable, the Tier 2, and doesn't constitute a pension account. And it has all the characteristics of the Tier 1 account, because the costs are similar, the way of fund management is similar, and the asset allocation is also similar to the Tier 1 account. The similarities are there, but the dissimilarities only in the tax part and the withdrawal part. So coming back to NPS, I'd like to split the product into three phases, just the entry, accumulation, and the exit. So entry is joining the scheme. So we have distribution points that are point of presence through which a subscriber can join, or in the corporate, if the employer wants to adopt NPS as a scheme for its employees as a retirement benefit scheme, it can either join directly with us by registering with us, or it can take the help of a point of presence. So the restrictions that, or the requirements that are there, eligibility conditions that are there, are that any individual who are aged between 18 to 65 can join the scheme. Certain KYC norms are there which has to be fulfilled, and the account can be opened online or by filling up a physical form. After having opened the account and getting a pension account number or the permanent retirement account number, contributions can flow. Contributions also, there is flexibility. Either it can be flowing from the individual itself, or it can be a combination with the employer and the employer. The contribution percentage of contribution from the employer and the employer can be equal, unequal, or it can only flow from the employer or only from the employer also. The contributions are getting invested by the fund manager according to the asset allocation or the choices of investments instruments that has been chosen by the subscriber. And at the end of the day, the contributions are being converted into units based on the net asset value declared by the fund manager at the end of the day for the scheme that has been chosen. These units are being reflected in the pension account and are recorded by the CRA, which the subscriber will be able to see in his statement of account or his pension account. So as contributions are being made on a regular basis, these are getting unitized and getting reflected in the subscriber's pension account. And these units reflect the value of the accumulated corpus of an individual or a subscriber. The last phase is on the maturity. So the normal maturity of the scheme is at 60 years of age. So on normal maturity, the amount outstanding in the pension account, 60% of that corpus or the amount that is outstanding is paid as a lump sum to the bank account, and 40% is being paid to the insurance company or for annuitizing it or to receive an annuity plan. Before 60, if somebody wants to exit the scheme, the only condition is that it has to complete 10 years in existence, or 10 years, a person has to complete 10 years of subscription to the scheme. So in that case, only 20% is paid as a lump sum, and 80% is given to an insurance company to receive an annuity from that corpus. But there are conditions to it. If the corpus is less than 1 lakh in the premature exit, the entire corpus is being handed over to the subscriber. And in case the corpus is up to 2 lakhs in a normal exit, up to at the age of 60, the entire corpus is being given to the subscriber. When I'm talking about annuity plans from an insurance company, we have annuity service providers empaneled with us. There are 12 leading insurance companies which have got registration from us, empanelment from us, and they offer almost variety of annuity plans, ranging from annuity from life and with annuity for return of corpus. So all the insurance companies offer different varied insurance annuity plans differing, and the annuity rates also differs. At the point of exit, the subscriber needs to choose the annuity service provider and the annuity plan from which he will derive a pension. Regarding the choices that the subscriber needs to make, first a choice comes on the record keeper. We have 2 record keepers. We have the same set of service standards, but there is a cost differential to them, to both of them, between them. And the next is that we have 7 fund managers, and these fund managers has to be selected by the subscriber or by the corporate for making the investments, and this choice can be changed once in a year. When it comes to the asset allocation, we have 2 choices. One is an active choice and one is an auto choice. When we talk about active choice, we say that according to the risk perspective or the risk appetite of the subscriber, the choices in equity, corporate bond, and government securities and alternate assets can be made by the subscriber. Accordingly, the contributions will be invested as per the choices being made. In equity, we have permitted a maximum allocation of the contribution up to 75%. Corporate bonds, yes, 100% of the contribution can go to the corporate bonds, or 100% can go to the government securities. In case of alternate assets, the restriction has been put to 5% of the total contributions being made by the subscriber. This choice also can be changed twice in a year by the subscriber by putting in a request. If a subscriber doesn't want to make an active choice or choose the allocation between equity, corporate bond, and government securities, we have 3 life cycle funds. Life cycle funds are nothing but it's a predetermined allocation of the corpus or the contributions between the 3 asset classes. So we have an aggressive fund which is called LC75, a moderate one which is called LC50, life cycle 50, and a conservative one which is LC25. So here the only difference is that in the aggressive life cycle fund, we have equity exposure of 75 and moderate 50, and in the conservative one, we have an equity exposure of 25%. This exposure remains constant till the age of 35. After the age of 35, the equity exposure goes on reducing. In case of an aggressive, it goes on reducing at the 4%. And for the moderate, it goes on reducing at the 3%, and the last one, conservative, it goes on reducing at the rate of 2%. So ultimately, at the age of 55, the aggressive fund will have an equity exposure of 15%. The moderate one will have an equity exposure of 10%, and the conservative one will have an equity exposure of only 5%. This choice also can be changed in between, as told earlier, that this asset allocation choice can be changed twice in a year from active to auto, and between the auto also it can be changed between the life cycle funds between an aggressive, conservative, and a moderate one. Returns of funds have been spoken about. In fact, the fund managers have been able to deliver more than 10% across all the schemes, and the longest experience that we have is in the central government scheme, which is for 12 years, wherein the equity exposure is for 15%, less than 15%. Government security is around 50%, and corporate bond is around 37%. So in that fund, the returns over the last 12 years is only is 10.04%. And equity, yes, we have around 10.67%. Corporate bonds in the last 11 years, it's an average return of 10.37%. Government securities around 10.18%, and state government, which started around 2009, has delivered a return of 9.95%. Coming back to the overall status of the PFRDA has regulates or manages is we have a customer base of around 3 crores and 87 lakhs, wherein 2.5 crores is only Atal Pension Yojana subscribers, majority of them, and around 73 lakh subscribers from the government sector. 25 lakh subscribers are from the non-government sector. Of the 8,000 corporates that we have around 10 lakh 63,000 subscribers from that 8,000 corporates. And we had another scheme which had been discontinued. It's an NPS like, which is a government scheme, where we have around 43 lakh subscribers in it. The overall corpus that is being contributed and that is being managed by all the fund managers is almost 5,30,000 crores, of which government contribution is the highest, around 4,37,000 crores. And in the corporate, it's around corporate and the non-government, it's around 73,000 crores. NPS light, we have around 4,200. And in case of APY, the Atal Pension Yojana, we have around 14,000 crores. Accessibility of the account, as we say, we have a mobile app wherein it's available on the Android and the iOS, which can be downloaded. And according to the record keeper that has been chosen, the apps are different. And the subscriber can access his account on the mobile app itself. Apart from viewing the account, he can pass on also instructions like make on contributions, make withdrawal requests, and also switch between the fund managers and asset allocations also. The account is also accessible through the web portal after logging into the account. This facility is also available. This is the last slide, and I'd like to talk about the grievance mechanism that we have. We have a centralized grievance redressal mechanism, and we have regulations to it. So if any subscriber is aggrieved of the system or the services that he has, he can represent to the intermediary or the entity with whom he has the grievances. And we have a timeline and a schedule that it has to be resolved within a period of 30 days. If the subscriber is not satisfied with the first level of resolution, it can move to the NPS trust. And even if the subscriber is not satisfied, he can move to the ombudsman. The next level after the ombudsman level of non-satisfaction is we have the regulator itself, the authority, the PFRDA. And the last resort of this, even if the subscriber is not satisfied with the resolution given, we have the Securities Appellate Tribunal. With this slides, with this presentation, I'd like to hand over to take it forward to Mr. Ghosh, and we'll be happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you, sir. Now I would invite Madam Baros Kamdin to deliver her thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Thank you, Bandyopadhyay, Chairman PFRDA, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chattopadhyay, Indian Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Ghosh for organizing this. I think it's a very valid session because we've seen during the pandemic, India generally was a country with a very high saving rate. And then it has been reducing over some time now. And in the pandemic, because of the lockdown, the saving rate has gone down still further. So if the saving rates goes down and we don't have a government social security available, pension available, it is very important that we should have our own personal pension schemes to invest so that our retirement is taken care of. All the speakers have spoken earlier that, our retirement, post-retirement age has increased, and therefore all the more reason that we should have savings which we can then utilize when we retire. I can share my personal experience. I was working earlier in a firm and I quit that firm after 8 years of service. And at that point of time, the requirement was that you should complete at least 10 years of service for you to be eligible for pension. So all the employer's contribution which was made to the pension scheme of that organization was complete waste. So I did not get my money at that point of time, nor when I'll retire, I'll get the money. It has been lost completely. It was only 8 years and not material. But still, I think the new national pension scheme, the way it is, it says early that, you can put, and it's actually your account. So even if you change employers, you don't use the contribution which has been made to that fund. And that's a very important criteria. Second important criteria, I think, is that you can decide how you want to make your investments. Those people who are not very comfortable in actually managing their own funds, say, your debt, they have this confusion. They feel it's so confusing if you have choices. The more the choices that you have, it's more confusing. But there's one very good scheme which is there in NPS, is that government securities. I can put 100% in government securities. And the return on the government securities also was 10% plus. So a person, if he doesn't want to make a choice, doesn't want to actually do managing his own funds, but just wants to get a return based on security, like a fixed deposit. Fixed deposit in banks is now not very risk-free. As compared to that, you have government securities which are giving you the returns. And earlier, an individual could not even invest in government securities. So here you have a scheme where you can invest completely in government securities, get a fixed returns there, and returns are more than 10%. So that's another advantage of an NPS. You will get returns based on what you manage your own funds with. We come to tax. Now, whenever we look at returns, we look at returns net of tax, because there's a tax element always involved in whatever returns you get from investments, whether it's provident fund, whether it's superannuation fund, whether it's public provident fund. So when investment in a particular scheme for retirement benefits, we see what are the tax advantages of that scheme. Milind, can you put up the presentation? What we are going to cover, what are the incentives that are there for investment in national pension schemes? What are changes that are being made with the Finance Act? And many have spoken today, the speakers have spoken that a lot of changes which is made in Finance Act. So we'll discuss that and few COVID reliefs which have been provided by government. Next slide. So whenever we look at retirement benefits or retirement funds, whether it's public provident fund or superannuation fund or your own funds which are there are 4 aspects that has to be taken care of whenever you make investments. What is the tax benefit that you get when the employer contributes to the fund? Does the employer get deduction for the contribution that they are making? Is the employer's contribution in the hands of the employees? What is the benefit that you get when the employer the fund? What happens to the annual accretion fund till the time prior? So you started this contribution at the age of 21 or 30, and then till the age of 60, 65, 70, you have to contribute to it. That fund is going to get some income on that. Is that amount going to be taxable even though you don't have access to it? So that's very essential to know. Employees' contribution, employer's contribution, annual accretion to the fund, and then on withdrawal. On withdrawal, whether it will become taxable or not taxable. Can you withdraw partially? When you withdraw partially, what the tax implications are. So we look at income tax through the life cycle of the fund. The next slide. So here we are going to be discussing the first and most important is the individual contribution. And if you look at it earlier, we used to have pension only for employees. Now, as a professional, when I'm working, I don't get pension. I don't have any contribution to provident funds. What happens to me? And national pension scheme is very much relevant for all those who are not employed. So the government has said that if you contribute, an individual contributes to the national pension scheme, as an individual and you're contributing and not as an employee, you get deduction up to 20% of your gross income. So from a gross total income up to 20% you can contribute and you get a deduction for it. If it's an employee, 10% of the amount of salary plus DA you can contribute and get a deduction under 80CCD. However, this deduction is again to be aggregated along with the other deductions which you get for provident life insurance, everything that you get under 80C, you have this aggregate limit of 1,50,000. So whatever contributions, whether it's to provident fund, public provident fund, life insurance, or national pension scheme, all of that gets aggregated to 1,50,000. Mr. Bandyopadhyay did mention that NPS has got a unique deduction. So NPS, if you contribute, additionally you get a 50,000 deduction. This is there only for NPS. It's not there for PF, it's not there for PPF, it's not there for life insurance, it's not there for the other schemes which are there. It's only for NPS that if you contribute 50,000, you get this deduction even if you've exhausted the limit of 1,50,000. So this is a clear benefit that you get. And if you're on the highest slab bracket, which goes up to 35% of tax rate, immediately you get a benefit of around 15 to 18,000 rupees. That's an immediate benefit that you're getting. So your net of tax contribution that is there, or actually be seeing the returns, is around 34, 35,000. So that's the benefit which you're getting by contributing to National Pension Scheme presently. And this is where you're actually being taxed at the normal rate of tax. However, what the government now believes is that Indians are going to be saving, and saving should not be given tax advantages. So if you don't save, you should still get a lower rate of tax. So government has introduced a lower rate of tax regime, which is there under section 115 BAC. So you don't make investments, you don't get certain exemptions from your salary, and you can take a lower rate of tax. When we've looked at people who are in the very low brackets are at an advantage. Supposing if you don't have money to invest, then and your salary slabs are lower, then it makes sense to go under the lower rate of tax. But however, we've seen other cases, and most of the cases where it's salaried employees, it is better to go on the normal rate of tax because you get your exemptions which are there, your LTA, HRA, all those exemptions also are withdrawn if you go for lower rate of tax. So therefore, most of the cases, though it's an exercise that has to be done by every individual, every employer to do this exercise to see what is more beneficial to it, whether you should go on a lower rate of tax or whether you should go on normal tax, and then accordingly make your contributions or savings. But this is a benefit which the government has provided. Now we come to the employer contribution. Contribution made by the employer to National Pension Scheme is fully taxable under Section 17. So the entire contribution is taxable. And it's also then included in the overall limit of the total employer contribution, which we'll discuss later, the 7,50,000 threshold limit. So the first part is that the employer contribution is fully taxable. However, what they've said is you get a deduction for that entire contribution under Section 80 CCD. Now the deduction when they're giving is restricted to 10% of basic salary in case of employees other than central government. And central government, if it's there, the threshold is 14% of basic salary. Therefore, what the employer needs to do is that they should ensure that whatever you contribute to the pension scheme should be less than 10%. If it exceeds 10%, then the deduction will not be allowed. Of course, the employee will get the benefit because you're getting returns on that contribution, but it will be taxed. That's the only difference which is there. So if you pay tax on that amount, it is fine. But if you want to pay tax on the contribution of employer, then you should see that your employer's contribution is less than 10% of your basic salary and dearance allowance. And for central government, it's 14%. Little gap, I think, we understand that in case of state government also, the employer's contribution is up to 14%. But the deduction section has not been amended. The amendment only covers central government employees. So maybe for state government employees, likely there could be an amendment which may come in the budget, which is going to be presented. Otherwise, presently as it stands, the state government employees could be taxed to the extent of 4%, which is additionally paid by the employer. And this deduction for employers' contribution continues even if you opt for a lower rate of tax. So you can actually opt for a lower rate of tax and still your employer's contribution will not be taxed. We come to annual accretion to the NPS account. Annual accretion is not taxable. It is completely exempt from taxation. It is not taxable when the accretion happens in that fund. However, the Finance Act has amended this, and we will discuss the amendment later. But the Finance Act has said that any accretion which happens, whether it's interest, dividend, or other similar nature to the credit of the fund, then whatever accretion relates to the excess amount over and above 7,50,000 will be taxable. So we will come to that little later as to how that accretion will get taxed. Now, withdrawal from the fund at the time when you're retiring or on closure when you're opting out of that scheme, the amount is taxable as per Section 80 CC D3. So the law very clearly provides that when you withdraw the money from the national pensions account, the same is going to be taxable. But what they have said is that whatever amount is paid to buy an annuity policy, so 40% of the amount will go towards purchasing an annuity policy, and 40% will not be taxable. And 60% is also not taxable because there's a special exemption which has been provided under Section 1012A. Therefore, if you look at it, 100% of the amount that you withdraw from a national pension scheme should not be taxable, which is very similar to or your PPF. Whatever you withdraw from the PPF account on maturity is not taxable. Only difference here is that here there's a compulsory purchase of an annuity scheme of 40%. And the annuity scheme, once you purchase, and the annuities that you receive after that would be fully taxable. So Mr. Mono did refer that there are different schemes on annuity. Now, if you buy a scheme which does not have a return on capital, return of the annuity value, whatever you've taken as a purchase cost, then what happens is effectively you're buying an annuity of say 1,000 rupees and the annuities what you receive is taxable and you're not getting a deduction for this purchase of the annuity. So that's something that is being discussed and the government is aware of it. But today as it stands, annuities what you receive on the annuity policy is fully taxable. If you buy an annuity policy where you have return of capital, then of course you will get your capital back. Partial withdrawal from the fund during the financial year. So 25% of the total amount payable to an employee from his employee's contribution is exempt from tax on withdrawal. And this speaks of employees only, it doesn't speak of individual. So if an individual were to withdraw up to 25%, he may get taxed on it because the way the words have been used in the section 1012B, it speaks only of employees. So therefore, there's a doubt that an individual withdrawing from the fund on partial withdrawal may get taxed. Contribution tier 2 account by central government employees. And I think this tier 2 account is a very good account. It's a normal mutual fund account that you have. The advantage here is basically to say that in mutual fund, the cost which is attributed to the mutual fund is much higher as compared to the cost which is attributed to a tier 2 account. There is no tax advantages of contributing to a tier 2 account except for central government employees. And that gets covered under section 80C. So if a central government employees were to contribute to a tier 2 account, they could get a deduction subject to the tier 2 account being held for 3 years. So you have to hold that account for 3-year period. And it's within 50,000. So the overall limit cannot be breached. The 1,50,000 limit stays, but still the central government employees could get up to 1,50,000 if they contribute to a tier 2 account. Tier 2 account is like a mutual fund. So all whatever you get would be subject taxable. Whatever annual accretion is there should not be taxed on the tier 2 account. But whenever you withdraw from the tier 2 account, that should be taxable as normal income. The next slide. And to add further on the tax benefit before we go to Finance Act, like a mutual fund is exempt from taxation because it's like a tax transfer. The mutual fund is not taxed, but the investors in the mutual fund are taxed. Similar is the case with National Pension Scheme. National Pension Scheme trust is not taxed. It is exempt from taxation because the individuals who are contributing to the scheme are taxable on it. So that exemption is available to National Pension Scheme also. Further, National Pension Scheme is not subject to tax on securities transaction tax. So whenever you buy and sell securities on a stock exchange, you need to pay a securities transaction tax. Everyone needs to pay that. But a National Pension Scheme does not have to pay a securities transaction tax. So there's an advantage. You save cost on that by not paying a securities transaction tax. Dividends, as you are aware now, when you make investment in shares, dividends were earlier exempt from tax and you had to pay a dividend distribution tax. The Indian company was paying a dividend distribution tax. Going forward from 1st April 20 onwards, Indian companies have to now withhold tax. There's no dividend distribution tax that has been removed and the dividends are fully taxable and there's a withholding tax. Indian companies, when they pay to a national pension trust, does not withhold tax. So you get a cash flow advantage. They don't withhold tax when they pay to a mutual fund also. But if they were to pay individually to individuals or to any other corporates or any other fund, there would be a withholding tax. But there's no withholding of tax when the dividends are paid to a national pension trust. That's an added advantage. Benefit is there for you. The cash flow into the fund itself without the tax amount on it. And tax could be as high as 10% or 20%. Now we come to Finance Act 2020. So in the Finance Act, prior to the Finance Act, what was happening was there were 3 contributions which are being made. Employers' contribution to recognized provident fund, employers' contribution to the national pension scheme, and employers' contribution to approved superannuation fund. Now, when you look at taxation for employers' contribution to recognized provident fund, it was not taxable. Said that if you contribute more than 12%, it could be taxable, but most employers who are not contributing more than 12%, it used to be in the range of 10 to 12%, and therefore the entire employer's contribution was not taxable for contribution to recognized provident fund. National pension scheme, as we saw earlier, employer's contribution was fully taxable, and that still continues. So the employer's contribution to national pension scheme is fully taxable. However, you get a deduction in the section 80CCD, which is also there. Employers' contribution to approved superannuation fund, which used to be private funds, that they said that up to 1,50,000 rupees, it will not be taxable. Anything above 1,50,000 rupees was taxable. This is what they've amended now. So this thing, what they're saying, that employers' contribution to approved superannuation fund, this clause 17.2.7, which was there earlier, has been deleted, and a new clause has been inserted, which says the aggregate amounts of all contributions made to the account of an SSE by the employer to recognized provident fund, NPS and superannuation fund to the extent it exceeds 7,50,000 rupees in any previous year is taxable. So now all the contributions, and this is applicable from the current financial year. So from April 20 onwards, all contributions that are made to recognized provident fund, NPS and superannuation fund, you aggregate the total together, If it exceeds 7,50,000 rupees, then the excess is taxable. And here we don't have to allocate to what it is relating to. All three have to be aggregated, and then the excess is to be taxed as a perquisite in the hands of the employee. And this is what Mr. Banerjee was referring to, that now the employers are trying to restructure their salaries to say that, whether they should be looking into this taxation, whether they should restrict the employer's contribution, or if there's any excess tax. Most of the companies that we have been discussing with have said that if there's any excess tax, then the tax should be borne by the employee, holding which it will be taken as a perquisite. And they're not reworking the contribution. Linked to this is the annual accretion. Now, if there's any annual accretion to all these funds together, and if the test contribution made, so if I have contributed during the year 8 lakh rupees and 7,50,000 was the excess, 50,000, which is the excess amount, annual accretion relating to this 50,000 would be taxable. Now, how do we allocate this 50,000? That allocation methodology has still not been prescribed. So the government has very clearly said in the section itself that they will come out in a manner and they will prescribe it. So we're expecting rules to come out. And since this is applicable for the current year, most probably it should come out before March or by the next year. They will prescribe the rules to say that how will you allocate or give the preference to it? Should the first 50,000 go towards Provident Fund or should go to a national pension scheme? And then you need to work out. Because as you know, recognized provident funds also give you interest component or income component at the end of the year. Superannuation funds also have that. So there has to be some methodology which the government will prescribe to arrive at how you determine what is taxable of the annual accretion, which relates to the excess amount over and above 7,50,000 rupees. So this methodology is still going to be fixed and it will be coming out. The government will issue rules for the same. The next slide to it. These are basic COVID reliefs which the government has provided, and it was for the first 3 months that was there. So the employer-employee contribution to PF was reduced from 12 to 10% in respect of wages. We also understand that government in some cases are still contributing on behalf of the employer also. A non-refundable advance was given to EPF members. Now the question on taxation comes on this. If the employee has worked for less than 5 years, and I'm getting a non-refundable advance, would that become taxable in the hands of the employees? Our view is it should not be taxable as the PF account has not closed and I'm still a member. Only what I've got is a non-refundable advance and therefore that amount should not be taxable. Partial withdrawals that we discussed for certain for financial needs for certain medical expenses. PFRDA has allowed that, like we mentioned, if it's a partial withdrawal which comes within the conditions of 25% of the amount of employees' contribution, it should not be taxable. It is exempt, specifically provided in the Act. However, that refers only to employees. So if an individual were to withdraw, the amount could be taxable. Investments for claiming deduction under Chapter 6A. And this is very important. Generally, for a financial year, if you make investments, say under 80C or 80CCD, you need to make your investments within the year end. So by 31st March 2020, I should have made my investments. However, because of the pandemic coming in the last half month of March, the government extended this timeline till 31st July 2020. So from April, May, June, July, you could have made investments in this period and claimed a deduction for the earlier year. So you're getting a refund because you're claiming a deduction for the earlier year. Also, if you want to go for a lower rate of tax in the current year, you could still make the contributions and claim a deduction in the earlier year. So this was an advantage which government gave, a benefit which many individuals have taken benefit of, and that make a payment later post the financial year close and claim a deduction in the earlier period. An extension of timeline for filing the return of income. This has now been extended from November to 31st December. So the timeline has been extended till December to file the return of income. This is only timeline of income which has been extended. Those investments stand at 31st July itself. So those timelines have not been extended. Whatever you contribute post July, current year's deduction. Even what you contribute between April to July can be taken for the current year if you've already exhausted your limit for the earlier year. So if you've seen the return form, there's a clause which they ask specifically, they ask you, have you made contributions in the next year and whether you're claiming that as a deduction. So the return of income form has been changed to that effect. we are through with the tax implications. We would be happy to take any questions on this. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you, Chairman sir. The first question is really very, very critical. It is from a senior person. He's saying, I have retired, but I can still take advantage of PPF for my tax benefits. Why can't I take advantage of NPS? Can't I have a lump sum benefit instead of a pension, something like build up a corpus?
The question is whether he wants to join NPS or it is something else.
He wants to join NPS. He's saying, but I can't, after having retired, how can I join NPS?
Yes, but see, if you are asking about the age limits that we have extended up to 65 years, especially thinking about the people who are retiring and after retirement, they feel that they don't need so much of liquidity. They can still spare some amount to create a pension fund. And if they are joining at the age of say 60, 61, they can continue up to the age of 70 also, so that they can, over the last 8, 9, 10 years, they can make some small corpus out of it and they can continue to get the tax benefit. So that is there. But if his question is that why we are not giving back the entire thing in a lump sum like PF or PPF or other things, then the answer will be the basic purpose of creating pension is some kind of a regular income post-retirement. So we know what happens to PF contributions, because most of the people, they are allowed to take withdrawals as and when they wish and as many times as they wish. As a result, many of them, when they retire, they have a very small corpus to start with. And in many times, if you have a corpus at the point of retirement, entire retirement fund at one go, always there is a tendency that whatever is your immediate requirement there, you will spend. And as we are talking about another 18, 20 years, there will be no regular income to support that person. So with that specific purpose only, a scheme was created like NPS, where there is a mandatory 40% annuitization. It is only to create that regular income, which is very, very important at that period of time.
Thank you, sir. The next question is a bit involving Madam Baroj Kamdin and you. The question is that a lot of there is corporate interest in the NPS scheme, but that interest percolating down to employee level is not that high. I mean, with tax benefits, how do we increase the employee level engagement? I mean, is there some recommendation from your side?
Yeah, see, basically, what I can say is that when a person joins an employment, I believe that is the time to tell that person that yes, NPS also, and one more investment option is there where he or she can create a large amount of corpus over a period of time. As we understand, our experience says that when a person joins, a lot of forms are given to that person to open bank account, this, that, and that form necessarily contains PF joining form. So at that time, actually, we have to give him an option for NPS also. PS is good, PF is good. We are not contesting that. But along with that, if this option is also given, because most of people are not aware that NPS option is also there. Even after having a PF, people can have NPS. So these are not mutually exclusive of each other. So that is only to be told to them, and this option is to be given. We have engaged with many banks, those who are having corporate salary accounts. So their experience also says that the right time to catch this younger group of employees is the point when they are joining. And those who have really made a dent, some of the private sector corporate banks, they could get this kind of numbers because they were there at the point when the people were getting onboarded, they were joining the employment, and at that point only they pitched for NPS and they got it. One particular bank, while onboarding, they are doing onboarding through a tablet-based method, where one prominent option is NPS. So the moment people see that this option is there, they ask what is NPS, then a conversation starts. So actually, that's what the job of the employers also, I believe, to a great extent, to tell them that one more option is there. And somewhere the conversation has to start, and thereafter, if the corporate wants, we can take it to a conclusion. We can also help them out.
This is Beroz here. I completely agree with Mr. Bandyopadhyay. I think when the employee is joining, it's very essential that he be given that information that, he can open an NPS account, and also to educate them during the year. So most of the times we've seen that PF is like statutory and it's always done. But sometimes in February, whenever we have to put in money and we have to take that benefit of that 1,50,000 limit, which is there, in February also, we should then have a session which shows them that, it's not such an issue. Making a choice is not difficult. There are government securities and there are returns which come from government security. So even if they don't want, because a lot of people at the lower level, what we found is that they want to just put in money in fixed deposit and get a return. So they think that if I put in PF, I get a fixed return and that's it. They really don't want to do managing of funds and all of that. They feel they're not competent enough to do managing of funds and all that. So at least somewhere an education session by the employer in January, February is very essential. If they do this in Jan, February, of course, at the start, they have to do it when the employee is joining. But every year in Jan, Feb, if they can have a financial wellness program for their employees, that would be very essential, where they really can speak about what the benefits are of NPS.
Right, absolutely. Any other questions, Mr. Ghosh?
So there one request for some write-up that can be given after the program, and one request about the digital KYC. I mean, that's something was asked in other programs also, but here also they asked for digital KYC mechanism.
Yeah, digital KYC is already there. We have digital KYC, and as I touched upon in my initial address, is that these online onboarding processes are really working out to our favor. And a lot of people are now entering through the online processes with the digital KYC and all that. And to the extent, recently we have introduced even video KYC, which was introduced initially by RBI sometime in April, and immediately it was followed by SEBI. So we have followed on their footsteps, and we have also enabled our distribution channels like banks or SEBI controlled entities to introduce the similar kind of video KYC also, so that they need not come, and through a video with a geotagging, they can do the KYC sitting at the comfort of their home and still open the accounts. So all the processes are there, and we are trying to make it as easy a process as possible.
And one last question: are you giving daily valuation to nowadays?
Yes. It is daily valuation, and it is just like the valuation is just like your mutual funds as they are doing. So every day, that means our performance is judged every 24 hours. So our fund managers are on their toes to see that, to take advantage of the volatility also, to see that the daily valuations do not go down sharply.
So another
daily
question.
Valuation is there, and by 8:30 the valuations are uploaded.
Another question, sir. This is from corporate. Is the NPS employer contribution comes under employee taxable income, or it's a employer taxable income?
So I leave it to the expert. Madam Beros is there. I leave it to her to answer.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question again? The connection was not so good.
Is the NPS employer contribution coming under employee taxable income or employer taxable income?
Employer's contribution will come under employee's taxable income. Employer gets deduction for the contribution that it makes, but whatever contribution the employer makes, say 10% of salary is contributed by employer, 10% by the employee. The employer's contribution will come as my perquisite, but it will not come because I get a deduction under 80. So first is taken as a perquisite and then I get a deduction for it.
So it is added and then again it is deducted the same amount. So the net effect is 0.
Net effect is 0. Now only what you have to look at is if it exceeds 7,50,000 rupees, then some amount may get taxed.
Okay, fine. That's all for today. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Chattopadhyay.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh.
Sir,
thank you, Mr. Chattopadhyay.
Anything to say, sir, Mr. Chattopadhyay?
No, I am very happy because we had a very enriching discussions. We had very enriching discussions, and there are many questions. Generally, not the employers. Employees are always moving with questions that what is our future? The mega sum we are saving through our PF or NPS or whatsoever. What will be the final outcome? What will be getting at our retirement? Because obviously, returns on every investment is day by day cutting down, going down, and that is the main worries of all the employees now. Because as it is, employment market is drying up, and along with that, even these returns on all sorts of income, that is also very much on the dwindling side. So that is the main worries, because the thing is that bank rate has gone down, and share market as it is, on what pulse it is moving, it is also again doubtful, because as it is, industrial output is not that supporting with the share market index movement. So people are again scared that wherever they are putting their booties, whether they will get the return or not. And again, this purchase of annuities, another question comes that has been made somehow mandatory also, like in NPS.
Yes.
But the thing is that return on annuity on a future date, now nobody can guarantee, because day by day returns are coming down. So it is really very difficult to plan for the retirement benefit, retired drive, and the future of the retired persons. Because unless the social security cover is enriched in our country, real means of development is very poor. And particularly when population is increasing, mortality rate is falling, and life expectancy is also going up. So, considering all the things, picture is not very bright.
Mr. Chattopadhyay, I differ a little bit whether the future is bright or not bright, only a future time can say. But what we can do right now, I believe, when we get our month-end salary, normally we plan to spend. Maybe we have to change that habit and plan to save. First you plan to save and then you plan to spend. So that is one. Secondly, what we can only say is that as and when you have higher liquidity, kindly put your money into these long-term saving schemes, like whether it is EPF4, you have option to go for voluntary contribution, additional contribution. Those things people really do not look at. They feel that whatever employer is giving, whatever is being deducted from the salary, that is the total amount. No, they have that option. So all these options they have to look for and build up a future for themselves. So that is what. And secondly, you are talking about return on annuities. Yes, again, nobody can predict the future interest rates, but it is always going down, as we have seen. And Suranjan is being the actuary, he's smiling, but he can give you a better picture. Yes, but at PFRDA, we can tell you that we are also looking into options other than annuity, other payout systems.
No, Mr. Bandyopadhyay,
So,
although
which can be.
I admit fully with you, but one thing, this is really a sort of hedging against future worries. That is one thing. And another thing is for commoners, if they get all the funds in their pocket, they will not save otherwise, they will go for spending. So at least something
Yes,
is saved for the future. That is a big thing. Because once general wage earners, they get the full amount in their hand, they will not make any separate provision for their savings.
Yes,
So
yes.
without these compulsions, there will be some savings, and again, for larger interest also, as the savings goes up, naturally it will come back in form of investment and development also.
Correct.
So
correct.
that part is always there.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the habit of savings that one has to inculcate, and one has to really think about future, because 30 years, 35 years down the line, what will happen, nobody knows. But at least we have to accept the fact one day we are going to retire.
Oh, sure.
So if that acceptance is there, definitely people have to think about their future income, future life, and all that. And they have to take their decisions at that point of time. But
Sir,
if they take a decision to join NPS, we are always there to support him.
Sir, last question, sir. What happens to annuity payments after
Yes.
the death of the subscriber? What happens to annuity payments after the death of the subscriber? Does the nominee get it?
Yeah, there are different annuity schemes actually, and one has to choose from that. And the annuity rates also vary according to the annuity scheme you choose. The least cost annuity scheme, which gives one the highest annuity, is the annuity when the annuitant, the person dies, it does not come back to anybody, no annuity to the family, no corpus getting returned. So that of course gives the maximum amount of annuity during lifetime. So that is one. On the other side, there are annuities where the original pensioner will get, on his death, the spouse will get, and thereafter the corpus, the entire corpus with which the annuity was purchased, goes back to the nominee. So all these kind of schemes are there, but between the two, the rates will vary widely. Means the last one, definitely, since it gives so many benefits, obviously it will be a very, very costly product to purchase, and the annuity rate will come down. So they have to choose it very, very carefully. We give the calculation of all the kinds of annuities on our website. People can come, people can discuss, they can have a look, and thereafter they can decide. Our annuity service providers also, they also talk to the retirees, people who are going out of the NPS system, and tell them which annuity will suit them. But many annuities are there. If you choose that kind of annuity, an annuitant chooses that kind of annuity where the corpus is returning and there is a provision for giving similar annuity to the spouse, it is possible. It is there.
লিভ অ্যাপ্লিকেশন যেরকম হয় সেরকম দেবে কিন্তু আজকে কি ছিল আজকে তো আপনার রস্টার ছিল
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Suranjan. Thank you, Madam Barrows, for joining us. And actually, it has been a long journey, and we have been engaging in this kind of sessions for last I believe, more than 1 year, 1.5 years. And I believe we are able to create some kind of awareness, because the more and more corporates join, and the kind of surveys that Suranjan has conducted, that also shows that the awareness level is increasing. People are thinking of NPS in a big way now, and they are giving it as an option to their subscribers. That is a great thing, I believe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.